In the heart of Atlanta, where the summer heat clung to the courthouse steps like a second skin, Sarah Mitchell walked through a crowd that didn't see her. At 32, she carried herself with the kind of quiet that made people look twice, not out of recognition, but because something about her felt like it didn't belong in the chaos of a federal trial. Her navy blazer was crisp but plain, her hair pulled back in a low bun, and her eyes, sharp as cut glass, scanned the room without lingering. She was nobody to the reporters jostling for a quote, nobody to the attorneys flipping through case files, and nobody to the officer standing at the center of it all, Daniel Harper, badge gleaming, smirk sharp enough to cut through the tension. Sarah took a seat in the back row of the courtroom, her small crossbody bag resting on her lap. No badge, no briefcase, just a woman who might have been mistaken for a clerk or a curious local. But Sarah Mitchell was neither. She was a federal investigator with the Department of Justice, working undercover for the Office of the Inspector General, and she held a file that could unravel the man who thought he owned this room. 17 years ago, Sarah had been 15, a girl with dreams bigger than the cramped apartment she shared with her mother and older brother, Marcus, in Atlanta's West End. Marcus, 20 then, was her hero, a community college student who organized voter drives and spoke of justice like it was something you could hold. In 2008, during a protest against police brutality, Marcus was arrested for resisting arrest. The report, written by a young officer Daniel Harper, claimed Marcus had shoved an officer. No video, no witnesses, just Harper's word. Marcus was cuffed in front of his neighbors, his mother's cries echoing down the street. 3 months later, he died in custody, a heart condition, the coroner said, though Marcus had never been sick a day in his life. Sarah sat by her mother's side at the funeral, staring at Marcus's journal, left open to a page where he'd written, "Truth is heavier than lies, but it's the only thing worth carrying." That weight shaped Sarah. She didn't scream for justice or chain herself to courthouse gates. Instead, she buried herself in books, earned a criminal justice degree, and clawed her way into the DOJ, not to become a lawyer but to understand how a system could erase a man like Marcus and call it procedure. Her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts to pay for Sarah's tuition, never spoke of Marcus again, but Sarah saw the grief in her mother's hands, trembling as she folded laundry late at night. Sarah's mission wasn't revenge, it was to make sure no one else's name was erased like her brother's had been. Now, in the Atlanta courthouse, the air was thick with anticipation. Harper's trial for assault charges wasn't just a case, it was a referendum on a system that had shielded him for years. Reporters whispered about the Harper problem, and the public gallery buzzed with locals who'd seen too many cases like this one dismissed. Sarah's heart didn't race as she watched Harper adjust his tie, his eyes scanning the room with the confidence of a man who'd never lost. She felt the weight of Marcus's journal, tucked in her bag, and the encrypted drive holding evidence she'd spent years collecting. She wasn't here to spectate. She was here to end it. As Harper's gaze landed on her, his smirk faltered for a split second. Something about her stillness, her unyielding stare, unsettled him. He didn't know her, but he felt the weight of her presence, like a shadow he couldn't shake. "What's this?" he muttered, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Some activist sneaking into court. No dress code anymore. A few chuckles rippled through the room, but Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The truth she carried was heavier than his words, and she was ready to let it fall. The Atlanta courthouse hummed with the kind of tension that made your skin prickle, like the air before a storm. Daniel Harper stood at the defendant's table, his broad shoulders squared, his voice carrying the lazy arrogance of someone who'd walked these halls too many times to count. He'd been here before, facing charges that never stuck, his badge a shield that gleamed brighter than the truth. But today, his eyes kept darting to the back row, where Sarah Mitchell sat, her face a mask of calm that felt like a challenge he couldn't name. Sarah's hands rested on her bag, fingers tracing the outline of Marcus's journal inside. She'd read it so many times the pages were soft at the edges, his handwriting a map of a life cut short. Every word Harper spoke, mocking, dismissive, felt like an echo of the report that had condemned Marcus. But Sarah wasn't that grieving teenager anymore. She'd spent years building a network of the betrayed, people like Jasmine Carter, a former court clerk who'd been fired for asking why case files vanished overnight, and Ethan Ruiz, a tech specialist who'd saved server logs the system thought were deleted. They were her eyes and ears, her proof that silence could be broken. Harper leaned toward the judge, Margaret Ellison, a woman whose sharp features and colder demeanor had earned her the nickname Iron Maggie among Atlanta's legal crowd. "Your Honor," Harper said, his voice dripping with mock concern, "are we letting just anyone sit in on a federal trial now?" "She looks like she wandered in from a protest." He gestured toward Sarah, expecting the room to laugh, to bend to his will. A few did, but the sound died quickly. Judge Ellison's eyes flicked to Sarah, then back to her files, her silence a tacit approval of Harper's outburst. Sarah didn't move. She didn't need to. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, was recording every word, every chuckle, every moment of complicity. She'd learned early that evidence wasn't just documents, it was the moments people thought no one was watching. Her heart ached, not from fear but from the memory of Marcus's arrest, the way Harper had smirked as he cuffed him, the way the system had closed ranks. She'd promised herself she'd never let that smirk win again. Harper, sensing her defiance, stepped closer, his voice louder now. "I'm talking to you. You got a name, or are you just here to make trouble?" He reached for her jacket, his fingers brushing the fabric, a power move meant to shame her in front of the room. The courtroom held its breath. A young attorney gripped his pen, a clerk glanced at Ellison, but no one moved. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her eyes stayed locked on Harper's, steady, unyielding. She slid her phone out, the screen's light catching the edge of her face, and turned on the front camera. "Are you sure," she said softly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "you're grabbing the right person?" The room froze. Harper's hand hesitated, his confidence cracking like thin ice. He didn't know why, but the weight of her words, her gaze, made him feel exposed. Sarah didn't smile, didn't flinch. She was no longer just a woman in the back row. She was a spark, and the kindling of Harper's arrogance was about to catch fire. In a cramped apartment on Atlanta's west side, Sarah Mitchell sat at a plywood desk, the only light a flickering bulb casting shadows on soundproofed walls. The room was a fortress of secrecy, a fingerprint-locked file cabinet, 3 hard drives in anti-magnetic casings, and a router shielded with lead-to-block signals. No one in the building knew her real name. To them, she was just Emma, a quiet tenant who paid rent in cash and never lingered in the hallway. But inside this room, Sarah was piecing together a puzzle that could dismantle a corrupt system. Her network wasn't built on trust, it was built on shared betrayal. Jasmine Carter, 28, had been a court clerk until she questioned why case files for black defendants were marked "no storage required" and vanished. Fired for insubordination, Jasmine now fed Sarah internal memos, her hands shaking as she handed over USB drives in dimly lit coffee shops. Ethan Ruiz, 34, was a tech specialist who'd worked for the Atlanta PD until he refused to delete server logs showing tampered dashcam footage. He'd been demoted, then quit, but not before copying years of data. Ethan's quiet anger fueled his late-night hacks, slipping Sarah digital keys to locked systems. Sarah's investigation began with her brother Marcus's case, but it grew into something bigger, a web of dismissed civil rights cases, all tied to Officer Daniel Harper and Judge Margaret Ellison. She'd found patterns, missing footage, witnesses coerced into silence, case files altered at 3 a.m. with no audit trail. One name kept surfacing, Robert Vance, Georgia's Attorney General, whose campaign had received $1.5 million from a shadowy legal fund. Sarah's evidence included an email from Vance's office: prioritize case dismissals to maintain judicial stability. No appeals. The words burned in her chest, a reminder of the system that had erased Marcus. Every night, Sarah wrote in a journal, not digitally but by hand, her father's old fountain pen scratching against paper. She burned each entry after committing it to memory, a ritual to protect her work. Her latest find was a conversation recorded by a hidden mic in her pendant, capturing Harper and Ellison discussing a case involving Malik Evans, a 17-year-old black teenager arrested for loitering. The audio was clear. "Make it quick," Ellison said. "No media. File it as a technical error." Sarah's knuckles whitened as she listened, the memory of Marcus's arrest flashing, Harper's smirk, the cuffs, the silence that followed. But the system was watching her too. A week ago, a tracking device had been found in a file folder from a supposed ally, a court courier who'd promised to help. Sarah didn't confront him. She rerouted her data through Ethan's secure servers, her trust a luxury she couldn't afford. In her journal, before burning the page, she wrote, "They think they can bury me like they buried Marcus. But I'm not a name they can erase. I'm the ink that won't fade." The Atlanta courthouse was a maze of marble and steel, but its third floor held a secret, a bronze statue of Lady Justice, her scales tilted slightly, her blindfold a promise no one believed. Hidden in the statue's sword hilt was a microcamera, placed by Sarah Mitchell 3 weeks ago. It faced Judge Margaret Ellison's office door, capturing every move, every whispered deal. For 20 days, it recorded Officer Daniel Harper slipping in after hours, handing over files that never reached the public record. But on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a technician's routine sweep caught a signal glitch. The camera was found. Sarah got the news from Ethan Ruiz, her tech specialist, via a burner phone text: "Hive cracked. Camera's gone." Her heart didn't race, she'd prepared for this. The footage was already backed up, split across 3 encrypted drives, one with Jasmine Carter, one on a blockchain server, and one in a safe deposit box only Sarah could access. But the last 5 minutes of Friday's footage, showing Harper passing a sealed envelope to Ellison, hadn't been sent yet. If the system decoded it, they'd know Sarah's face. In her apartment, Sarah sat in the dark, the red blink of her encryption device her only light. She didn't panic. She'd built her network for moments like this, people like Jasmine, who'd once seen her own career erased for asking questions, and Ethan, who'd lost his job for refusing to delete truth. They weren't heroes, they were survivors, bound to Sarah by a shared need to fight back. Ethan had swapped the camera for a decoy before the sweep, planting false footage that would waste the system's time. Jasmine had rerouted case logs to a hidden server, buying Sarah hours. The threat came at 3:12 a.m., a text on her secure line: "Send anything else, and we'll find you before justice does." Sarah read it once, then removed the phone's battery, slipping it into a signal-blocking box. She wasn't afraid, but she felt the weight of Marcus's journal in her bag, his words a reminder: truth is heavier than lies. She moved to her backup base, an old telecom bunker in Atlanta's suburbs, its rusted door locked by a code only Ethan knew. There, she uploaded the Friday footage to 3 destinations: a civil rights group, an independent news outlet, and an international watchdog. Each file was tagged with a single note: Frame 942. Malik Evans. Unedited. The footage showed Harper shoving Malik, a 17-year-old, against a patrol car, his voice cold: "Keep looking at me, kid, and you'll regret it." Then, to the camera: "Cut it." The video ended abruptly, but the truth didn't. Sarah leaned back, the bunker's silence wrapping around her like armor. They thought they could scare her. They didn't know she'd already faced the worst loss of all. At 8 a.m., Atlanta woke to a firestorm. 3 news outlets, 2 local, 1 national, released a 42-second dashcam clip labeled Frame 942, Malik Evans Case. It showed Officer Daniel Harper shoving 17-year-old Malik Evans against a patrol car, his hand raised as if to strike, his voice sharp: "Keep looking at me, kid, and you'll regret it." Then, a chilling command: "Cut it." The video ended, but the accompanying server log was undeniable. Harper had marked the footage as corrupted, burying it in a restricted folder. Sarah Mitchell had sent it from an encrypted address, no name, just a note. The system hid this. The people won't. Social media erupted. Hashtag #MalikFrame trended within hours, paired with screenshots of Malik's arrest report, which claimed he'd been aggressive. Lila Evans, Malik's mother, appeared on a local news stream, holding the 2022 rejection letter for her son's appeal. Her voice was steady but raw. They said my boy was a threat. He was just walking home. This video is his truth. Comments flooded in. I was arrested for looking wrong too. Thank you, whoever found this. The hashtag became a confession, a chorus of voices the system had silenced. Sarah watched from her telecom bunker, the glow of her laptop the only light. She didn't smile, she didn't need to. The second file she'd sent hit later that day, financial records showing $1.5 million funneled to Attorney General Robert Vance's office through a Judicial Stability Fund. An email from Vance read, "Dismissals must be expedited to avoid unrest." Hashtag Vance 1.5M surged, memes mocking his press conference denial. I never received anything, except $1.5 million, spreading like wildfire. The state's response was vague, "We're reviewing these allegations." But the public wasn't waiting. Sarah's chest tightened as she read Lila's words online, echoes of her mother's grief after Marcus's death. She hadn't just released evidence, she'd given people like Lila a voice. But the system wasn't done fighting. A new text arrived, "You've gone too far. Stop now, or you won't walk away." Sarah didn't reply. She encrypted the next file, audio of Judge Margaret Ellison and Harper planning to bury Malik's case, and send it to her network. Jasmine and Ethan were ready, their own scars fueling their resolve. The truth was out, and no threat could pull it back. The Eastern District Federal Courthouse in Atlanta was a fortress of glass and stone, but on that morning, it felt like a stage. By 6 a.m., hundreds lined the gates, journalists, activists, and ordinary people clutching photos of loved ones lost to the system. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat taken, the air heavy with a silence that felt sacred. Sarah Mitchell stood at the center, no longer the invisible Emma from a West Side apartment. She wore a white blouse and navy blazer, her face calm but her eyes burning with purpose. Beside her stood Lila Evans, Malik's mother, holding a faded photo of her son at a school play, and Tanya Brooks, 19, whose wrongful arrest had been dismissed as a clerical error. This wasn't a trial, it was a reckoning. Sarah had forced a public federal hearing on systemic corruption, her evidence too undeniable to ignore. She stepped to the stand, her voice steady. "I didn't bring arguments today. I brought people the system tried to erase." She nodded to Lila, whose son had spent a year in juvenile detention for loitering, and Tanya, arrested for disorderly conduct while protesting. Jasmine Carter, the fired clerk, held a USB with recovered case logs, and Ethan Ruiz, the tech specialist, carried server data the system thought was gone. Sarah played the audio, Harper's voice, cold and deliberate, "File it as a technical error. No media." Then Ellison's, "Make it quick." The room gasped, reporters' cameras flashing. Lila spoke next, her voice breaking but firm, "My son lost a year of his life because they lied. I'm here to take his name back." Tanya followed, her hands trembling, "I was 19, scared, and they told me I had no case. But I'm here now." The testimonies weren't loud, but they were unshakable, each word a crack in the system's foundation. Harper sat at the defendant's table, his face pale, his hands twitching. Judge Margaret Ellison, once untouchable, stood to leave, her briefcase clutched like a shield. She didn't speak, but her exit was louder than any gavel. A federal oversight agent entered, his voice cutting through the silence, "Officer Daniel Harper, you are suspended pending criminal investigation." The room didn't cheer, it held its breath, as if afraid to break the moment. Sarah looked at Lila, then Tanya, their eyes meeting hers with a gratitude that needed no words. She'd given them more than evidence, she'd given them a voice, and the system was trembling. Atlanta buzzed with a new energy in the days after the hearing. The hashtag one hand stays clean trended, inspired by Sarah Mitchell's words at the hearing, "If one hand stays clean, it must not let go," in a room full of dirty ones. On street corners, students wore white armbands, a nod to the clean hand symbol. A mural appeared on a downtown wall, a woman's silhouette, eyes forward, with the words, "Speak, even when they tell you not to." No one knew if it was Sarah, but everyone felt it was. The media couldn't stop replaying the hearing's key moments: Lila Evans's steady voice, Tanya Brooks's trembling hands, the audio of Harper and Ellison plotting. National outlets ran headlines like "One Woman's Fight Shakes Atlanta's Courts" and "The Truth That Broke the Silence." Social media became a confessional. People shared stories of dismissed cases, false arrests, silenced voices. A post read, "I was told my case didn't matter. Sarah Mitchell showed me it did." Another, "I stopped believing in justice until #Malik Frame." Sarah stayed out of the spotlight, watching from her telecom bunker. She didn't need the headlines, she needed the change. Her network, Jasmine, Ethan, and others, kept working, funneling new case files to civil rights groups. One evening, she opened Marcus's journal, reading his words, "Truth is heavier than lies." Her throat tightened, not from sadness but from the realization that she'd carried his weight and made it count. She wasn't alone anymore. Lila had started a support group for mothers of wrongfully arrested kids, and Tanya was training to be a paralegal, inspired by Sarah's fight. But the system pushed back. Attorney General Robert Vance held a press conference, his voice smooth, "These allegations are unverified. I've never interfered in justice." He didn't name Sarah, but the jab was clear. Doubt crept into some corners of the public. Did she leak classified data? Is she a hero or a vigilante? Sarah didn't respond. She sent one last file to the media, a ledger showing Vance's $1.5 million fund tied to dismissed cases. The hashtag Vance 1.5M roared back, drowning out his denials. Sarah leaned back in her chair, the bunker's silence her only companion. She'd sparked a movement, and it was bigger than her now. The Virginia Supreme Court's basement room, 7B, was a cold, windowless space, reserved for the kind of meetings no one wanted on record. Sarah Mitchell sat alone at a low chair, facing a panel of 5, 4 Judicial Ethics Committee members and a DOJ observer. Their faces were stone, their questions sharp. "Ms. Mitchell, did you leak classified data, compromising the judiciary's integrity?" Sarah didn't flinch. She placed a black folder on the table, labeled "Case Review, Atlanta Judicial Irregularities." "I'm not here to defend myself," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here to ask why 27 cases were buried under your watch." The folder detailed dismissed civil rights claims, Malik Evans, Tanya Brooks, and others, each with evidence of tampered files, erased footage, or coerced witnesses. One case hit close, a panel member's niece, whose harassment complaint was dismissed under Judge Ellison's orders. The man's hand shook as he read the page. Sarah didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The folder was a mirror, reflecting the system's failures back at them. "You called me here to judge me," she said, "but these cases judge you." The room fell silent. A pen clicked, a chair creaked, but no one challenged her. The DOJ observer nodded slightly, his presence a reminder that federal eyes were watching. The hearing ended abruptly, the panel adjourning without a ruling. Sarah walked out, leaving the folder behind. It wasn't evidence, it was a verdict. Outside, Atlanta was changing. The hashtag one hand stays clean had spread to law schools, where students debated ethics with Sarah's words pinned to bulletin boards. Lila Evans's support group grew, meeting in a community center where mothers shared stories of loss and hope. Tanya Brooks, now a paralegal student, carried a notebook with Sarah's quote, "If one hand stays clean, it must not let go." Sarah didn't join the protests or give interviews. She sat in her bunker, reading messages from strangers. You gave me courage to file again. My son's case is reopening because of you. Her eyes stung, not from pride but from the weight of Marcus's memory, finally lifted by others standing up. The Eastern District Federal Courthouse in Atlanta opened its doors to the silenced. 11 cases, once dismissed as insufficient, were reopened under public scrutiny, each with a review panel and civil rights observers. The first was Malik Evans's, his year in juvenile detention for loitering, now exposed as a lie. Lila Evans stood before the panel, her voice unwavering. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here for my son's dignity. The room listened, cameras rolling, her words etched into the official record. Next was Tanya Brooks, whose arrest for protesting was dismissed as a clerical error. She spoke softly, her hands steady now. I was 19, told I had no case. Today, I'm heard. Jasmine Carter presented recovered server logs, proving files were deleted under Ellison's orders. Ethan Ruiz submitted dashcam footage, clear and unedited, showing Harper's false reports. Each testimony was a brick, rebuilding a foundation the system had cracked. Sarah Mitchell watched from the back, her navy blazer blending into the crowd. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her evidence had opened the door, and the victims walked through. Malik's record was cleared, his smile small but real as he left the courthouse, Lila's arm around him. Tanya's case was overturned, her scholarship reinstated. The hearings weren't loud, but they were seismic, each reopened case a signal that silence could be broken. Outside, a small crowd gathered, holding signs. One hand stays clean. A student taped a note to the courthouse door. This is where the truth came back. Sarah's heart swelled, not with pride but with the memory of Marcus, whose journal she still carried. She'd signed the reopening petitions with his pen, each stroke a promise kept. The system wasn't fixed, but it was trembling, and for the first time, the silenced had names again. In a quiet corner of Atlanta's South Side, a new sign went up. Open Voices Community Legal Center. No ribbon cutting, no speeches, just a small office where Sarah Mitchell sat at a desk, reading case files under a yellow lamp. The center wasn't flashy, bare walls, a few chairs, a coffee pot that never stopped brewing. But every day, people came, a mother whose son's case was dismissed, a student expelled for causing discomfort, a man arrested for looking suspicious. Sarah listened, her father's pen in hand, writing notes for young volunteers, law students who came not for grades but to learn what justice meant when it wasn't guaranteed. Sarah didn't run the center, she was just its heart. Lila Evans led workshops for parents, her strength a beacon. Tanya Brooks, now a paralegal student, filed petitions with a precision Sarah admired. Ethan and Jasmine stopped by, sharing tech tips and old case logs, their scars now badges of defiance. The center wasn't about fixing the system, it was about giving people a place to speak, to be heard, to be believed. One evening, Sarah opened Marcus's journal, its pages worn but unbroken. She read his last entry. Truth is heavier than lies, but it's the only thing worth carrying. Her eyes blurred, not from grief but from the realization that she'd carried his truth and passed it on. Malik Evans, now studying engineering, sent her a thank you note. You gave me my name back. Tanya wrote, I'm not scared anymore. Each note was a piece of Marcus, alive again in the voices Sarah had freed. The state launched a full judicial review. Harper faced criminal charges, and Vance's resignation followed Ellison's. But Sarah didn't watch the news. She sat at her desk, signing a new petition to reopen a case, her father's pen steady in her hand. She wasn't a hero, she was a sister, keeping a promise. The system hadn't fallen, but it had cracked, and through those cracks, light poured in. To everyone who followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with Sarah through grief, defiance, and triumph. If her story moved you, hit the subscribe button and join Revenge Ties, where every voice tells a story of struggle, heart, and a new beginning. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment with your thoughts, and keep fighting for your own truth. We'll meet you at the next story, where justice isn't just a word, it's a promise kept.